Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kanan King, and on this channel I tell interesting or scary stories that I found on Reddit. If you have any stories of your own that you'd like to share with me, please do contact me on Instagram or even...
Where am I? Why is my hands tied behind? Who are you?
Are we doing this again?
Hmm?
You doing this again? Ignore the man. It is fine. You could even post your stories in the Reddit link down below in the description.
Please send help.
But for now, enjoy the video. So when I was a child, I remember having this dream. Not sure if it was a dream though. I was definitely around the age of 10. I remember being at this type of farmhouse in the middle of nowhere and this fence. But the thing is, this fence had a red light glow from its side, like if a car headlights was pointed in its direction. I remember that the light grew closer on the fence as if something was getting closer around the corner of the house or something. I also remember a woman with a shotgun hiding on the other end outside the house on the corner, really scared with another person. I'm not too sure about the whole memory as I was a child. However, when I was maybe 13, I came across to the McPherson's alien abduction, which was a similar encounter, but real, that happened in the 90s caught on camera, which is posted on YouTube. There was like 3 different videotapes of it, which people say it was a way to cover it up, but I am wondering if maybe I even had a dream, or if I was in my spiritual self observing a memory of something that happened in this McPherson abduction or something. Am I just being crazy? Was it a dream? And am I just acting silly? Or is there a spiritual/unnatural reason why I was able to relate to the McPherson's abduction before I ever saw any videos on it?
Last summer, my boyfriend and I were camping in the Ouachita forest off the Winona scenic route. We drove through the gorgeous spillway to a creek site where we had set up our camp, and we were laying in the hammock for the night. Next thing I know, our dog was growling this deep growl I'd never heard her make, so it caught my attention. I look in the direction she's growling in, and I see this weird humanoid figure just casually walking in the woods about 10 to 20 feet away from us. It's a light gray, maybe white color, 7-ish feet tall, very skinny, and has an abnormally large head. Our dog barks and catches its attention. It stops for a good 20 seconds, looks at us, then carries on its way. Needless to say, we immediately packed everything up and left. We hadn't taken anything recreational that night, though I sort of wish we had now. I truly don't know what it is I saw, but I'm so curious if we were the only ones to have ever seen anything like that in the area.
I've experienced many odd and unexplainable events in my life, but this event has been on my mind for a few years now, and I finally decided to tell it, and pray I'm not the only one who's experienced something like this. So let's start from the beginning. I graduated from high school in 2019 and was promoted to supervisor for a kitchen in a nursing home down the street. Since I oversaw dinner, I didn't start work until about 3:30 p.m. and would get home around 10 p.m. So for the first half of the day, I would be completely home alone. I enjoyed that time. Solitude was always nice, especially when you're as introverted as I am. Normally I would sleep in until about noon, but this time I decided to relax on the couch in our main living room and watch Kitchen Nightmares. I remember nodding off and falling into a light sleep, so any small noise would wake me up. The first few times I cracked my eyes open, it would just be from the cats jumping on me. So when I felt the cushion by my feet dip a bit, I figured it was my cat Peach. After a moment, I opened my eyes and realized my younger sister was sitting at the end of the couch, her back to me. I was half asleep, so I didn't really think much of it. I figured she'd just stayed home from school, sick. So I just asked her if she could move her head so I could see the TV, but she ignored me, still facing the TV screen. Annoyed, I asked her why she was home. Once again, she remained silent, coming to the conclusion that she was just being rude. Again, I closed my eyes and fell back asleep. After about another hour, I got up and started to get ready for work, and noticed my sister wasn't in the room or in the house. Concerned, I called her. After trying to call her a few times, and again nothing. I called my mother. She picked up, and I asked her if Sis told her where she was going. My mother was confused, asked me what I was talking about. She dropped Sis off at school before going to work. My sister had been at school this whole time. In shock, I hung up and kept this to myself, convinced I was losing my mind. That it was all in my head, but I remember that moment so vividly. What my sister was wearing, how she was sitting, how I felt a shift in the couch when she sat down. This wasn't a dream. This was real. It had to be. There was something in the house with me that morning, and it was not my sister. I kept this experience to myself. As a kid, I had what my parents called a very active imagination. Always seeing things, hearing things, and being easily spooked. So I think it got to the point where I just convinced myself this whole experience didn't happen, and that there was some rational explanation. It actually took me a few years to tell my little sister about this. Once again, mostly out of fear of being perceived as crazy, and I didn't want to spook my sister. But something she said to me changed that real fast. This takes place in September 2022. My sister and I were waiting in line for a ride at a local amusement park. Every year my dad's workplace would rent the whole park for employees and their families. We spent most of the day together as a family, but about an hour before closing, Sis and I went to the back of the park to ride some night rides. So it was just the two of us, and the waiting was getting terribly boring. Sis and I aren't very close and don't have much in common, so we struggled to have a conversation. For the most part, stood in silence. But out of the blue, she spoke up. "Kat, wanna hear something freaky?" As a lover of all things spooky, that caught my attention, so I immediately replied with an eager yes, and a part of me wishes I said no. My sister is a night owl, and over the summer would stay up until 6 a.m. I had just started working a different job after quitting my nursing home position. That's another scary story for a different day. So I was starting to go to bed at 12 a.m. every night and would be up around 10 a.m. So she would be the only one awake. One night she noticed light coming from the crack in her bedroom door, and she heard both my voice and our mother's voices talking. Only it was hard to understand, as if we were either speaking too quickly or just complete gibberish. She quickly grabbed her phone, checking the time, and her confusion only grew when she noted it was 3 a.m. What were we doing awake? Sometimes my mom and I would go to the front window if the weather was bad during the night to keep an eye on the storm, or if there were sirens. We both have a habit of being very nosy, so she figured that was what was going on. After a few minutes, she could still hear the voices and still see the lights, growing curious. She got out of bed and opened her bedroom door and rushed into the hall, expecting to see me and my mother by the window talking. Only that's not what she saw. There were no lights on. It was completely dark besides the illumination from her phone screen, and there was no one in sight. Not our mother, not me. Not even the cats were out there, unsettled and confused. She turned to my bedroom door, thinking I was messing with her. She opened my door and I was asleep with both cats. She goes back to the hall. Mom and Dad's bedroom door is also shut. She peeks in there and both are sleeping. Now my sister is a rational person. She was always the one to go to the basement first, tell the others that monsters and ghosts aren't real. So she completely pushed this event out of her mind, because in her eyes, it wasn't a big deal. Maybe she was just overtired, or our grandfather's TV downstairs was a bit too loud, and that's what she heard. But like my own experience, this kind of sat at the back of her head, and the house grew to be a little less comfortable. She mentioned how after that she felt like there was always someone watching, as if they were tucked in a corner just observing her. She wasn't scared out of her mind, just a bit confused. When she told me that, a pit in my stomach opened up and I had the chills. I laughed at first because, come on, we were in public and I didn't want to flip out. So we went on the ride, and for the remaining time in the park was open, we pushed that conversation on the back burner. On our way to meet up with our parents, we started talking about it again, and I finally told her about what happened to me, how I saw her at home that day, spoke to her and could remember what she wore. That was the first time I saw her get scared. "I wasn't home," she kept saying. "What do you think it was then?" We still don't know. We don't know if we want to know. The only thing we are sure of is there's something in our house.
So, this is admittedly a little shaky, and there's probably a logical explanation for this, but I think it's interesting, especially given where I heard it. As stated in several of my other posts, I live in a small southern city with a lot of Civil War history. About 2 months ago, I set out to put together a book of the city's ghost stories, as, at least to my knowledge, no one else has done so. This has led to a lot of on-foot research, a lot of questions, and 1 or 2 mistakes. My sincerest apologies to the one store. When I told you your place was haunted, I hadn't realized I was in the wrong place. One of the more prevalent ghost stories I've come across, so far as everybody seems to know some version of it, is that of a little girl who fell through a skylight of a grocery store in the 1930s, hit her head on a Coke machine, and died the next day. It's one of the few ghost stories I've come across for the book that's rooted in history, as the little girl did actually fall. I've seen a photograph of her. I've read newspaper articles about it, and I visited her grave. A lot of the finer points of the actual event seem to have gotten mixed up in the retelling of it, though, as I've heard people talk about the little girl falling through a window instead of a skylight, and pointing to other buildings on the street as the one she'd fallen out of. Supposedly, her ghost doesn't just haunt the site of the former grocery store, but the buildings on the other side of it too. Anyway, I was going for a walk one morning early, as I often do. Heading down the street, I was thinking of the cold, of the weather, of a half a dozen other things besides the ghost story about the little girl. I was walking by a series of shops when I heard the noise. A terrific sounding crash. Jumping, startled, I whirled towards the sound of the noise, only to find myself standing in front of the exact building the girl had fallen into. It's a jewelry store now, or at least will be until they move out soon. And admittedly, it could have been someone working inside who dropped something. Still, the place didn't open for another 2 hours, and it was fairly early in the morning. I almost looked in, probably should have looked in, but didn't. Just in case it was one of those workers, and not a ghost. I went on my way, rather shaken up, and have yet to hear anything else, no matter how many times I walked by that building. So, did I hear the ghostly replaying of that tragic accident, or just the mishandling of a clumsy employee? I don't know, and will probably never know. But that doesn't mean I won't quit hoping to hear it again.
And that's the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like, comment down below which one you enjoyed the most. And if you'd like to support the channel, there are links down below in the description for Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, or even supporting me by buying my dark fantasy novel.
Please, for the love of God, just buy this woman a coffee. She really needs it.
I really need it. Please. It would be really nice. We need it.
Yes.
Okay. But until next time, bye-bye.
End of story. Fuck.